My wife slept with my brother and cheated us out of $200, $0 during our divorce, then suddenly claimed ownership of the house and a Tesla I paid for. Now I'm facing a legal fight I never saw coming. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy to get blindsided like this. Honestly, I thought I knew everything about my wife, Emily. We had a good life, or so I thought. We'd been married for 5 years, built a house together, and I just bought her a Tesla last year as a surprise birthday gift. Things seemed fine, or at least I convinced myself they were. But then, out of nowhere, everything fell apart in a way I never saw coming. It started with little things. Emily's phone suddenly became her fortress. She'd hide it when I entered the room, keep her screen turned away, and sometimes even get defensive if I asked to see it. She became more distant, avoiding long conversations, and I caught her lying about where she went during her lunch breaks. Tell me she was at the office, but I found out she was meeting someone else, a guy named Jake from her gym. I saw the messages, the late-night texts, the flirty emojis. I knew something was off, but I didn't want to believe it. Then there was the money. Emily had always been a spender, but suddenly she was secretive about our finances. She'd hide receipts, transfer money into accounts I didn't recognize, and brush off my questions like I was overreacting. One day, I decided to check her bank statements. That's when I saw it, a transfer of $50, $0 to an account in her name, and another $20, $0 to some supposed investment she never mentioned before. I called her out on it, and her reaction was quick to turn defensive, calling me paranoid and accusing me of snooping. But I knew something was seriously wrong. The worst part came when I found out about the affair. I didn't want to believe it at first. I caught her one night coming home late, smelling like perfume I didn't recognize. She said she was working late, but I pressed her and her story started to crack. Then I saw her phone light up with a message from Jake. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Love you." That was the moment I knew. I felt my stomach drop and I knew I had to dig deeper. I stayed up all night going through her messages, her social media, anything I could find. And what I uncovered was worse than I expected. Not only was she cheating, but she was also plotting how to keep the money she stole from us during the divorce. She had lied about her assets, claiming she had nothing to do with the money she transferred, but I knew she was lying. She lied about everything, and I felt like I was living in someone else's nightmare. The next day, I confronted her. I told her I knew about Jake, about the money, about everything. Her face twisted into this bitchy sneer, and she started spinning lies faster than I could keep up. She said I was crazy, that I was imagining things, that she was only working late. She called me paranoid, insecure, even jealous, but I wasn't stupid. I saw through her bullshit. I told her I wanted a divorce, and that's when she really lost her temper. She yelled, called me an idiot, and said I'd regret it, that she'd take everything I owned, including the house and the Tesla I paid for. That's when I realized how deep this betrayal went. She was planning to take everything, including the money she lied about, and then somehow she claimed ownership of the house and the Tesla. I'd paid for both outright, the house was in my name, and I used my savings for the Tesla. But she suddenly claimed I was neglecting her, that she deserved her fair share. That's when the legal fight started brewing. I never even saw it coming. I always thought I knew my wife, but she showed her true colors fast, and now I'm stuck fighting to keep what's mine and figure out what's real in this mess. After the initial shock wore off, I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare. I couldn't believe she had been lying to me for months, hiding her affair and secretly siphoning off money. It was like I'd been living next to a stranger, someone I thought I knew but actually didn't know at all. The betrayal cut deep, but what hurt even more was the way she spun her lies, acting innocent when I knew damn well she was planning her next move. I started digging into everything, bank statements, emails, texts, anything I could find. I needed to understand how deep her deception went. The more I looked, the more I uncovered. She transferred money into accounts in her name, but I could see she'd been using those funds to support her new life. She bought herself designer clothes, went on expensive trips, and even paid for her gym memberships with money I didn't know she had. Meanwhile, she was telling me she was broke, that she couldn't even afford a decent dinner lately. I found out she'd been secretly meeting Jake at that same gym, sometimes multiple times a week. The texts were explicit. They talked about sex, about sneaking around, about their plans to run away together once she got her hands on the house and the money. She promised him the house, the Tesla, everything I'd worked for. She was ruthless in her lies, and I was furious. Not just because she cheated, but because she was stealing from us, our future, our savings, everything I'd built. Things took a turn when I decided to confront her again. I told her I had enough evidence, that I knew about the affair and the money. Her reaction was classic Emily. She got defensive, started crying, and then spun a new lie. She claimed that I was controlling, that I was paranoid, and that the money she took was just for herself, because I never paid enough attention to her. She cried about feeling neglected, how she needed more freedom, and how I'd ruined everything by being so suspicious. But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. I told her she was done with her lies, that I wanted a divorce, and that I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine. That's when she snapped. She started yelling, calling me names, saying I was a jealous, insecure bastard who didn't deserve her. She told me I'd regret it, that she'd take everything I owned, including the house and the Tesla I paid for. That's when she threw in the threat about the house and the Tesla, claiming she had rights to both because she was married to me. I told her she was crazy if she thought she'd take what I'd earned. I knew I had to get a lawyer fast. I reached out to a lawyer that same day. I wanted to know where I stood legally. Turns out, because I paid for the house and Tesla outright, she had no claim to them unless she could prove some kind of joint ownership or legal agreement I'd signed. But her plan was clear. She was trying to manipulate the situation to claim the house as her own and say she was entitled to half of everything. I knew I had to prepare for a fight, and I wasn't about to let her walk away with my money or my property. Meanwhile, she kept up her act of innocence, acting like she was the victim. She said she was confused, that she didn't mean to hurt me, that she just wanted to be happy. But I saw through her. The way she looked at me that day, with that fake smile and those cold eyes, told me everything I needed to know. She was a liar, a thief, and a manipulator, and I was sick of being played. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I gathered all the evidence I could: bank statements, text messages, recordings of her calls. I wanted to be ready for whatever she threw at me. I also started planning my next move. I knew I had to get ahead of her before she took everything, especially the house and the Tesla. She claimed she deserved her fair share, but I knew she was just trying to scare me into giving her more than she was entitled to. I wasn't going to let her do that. I was determined to fight for what I paid for, what I owned, and what was rightfully mine. This whole situation was a nightmare, and honestly I felt betrayed, angry, and exhausted. But I also knew I had to stay sharp. She was dangerous in her own way, lying, twisting the truth, and trying to control the narrative. I had to be smarter than her. I had to win this legal battle, not just for the money or the house, but for my dignity. I never thought I'd be in this position, but here I am, ready to stand my ground. The more I dug into her lies, the clearer it became how far Emily was willing to go to keep her new life afloat at my expense. I started talking to a lawyer, someone who knew the ins and outs of property law and divorce battles. The first thing he told me was that I had a strong case, especially since I paid for the house and the Tesla outright. But that didn't mean she wouldn't try to pull some stunt to claim half of everything. She was already preparing her defense. I found out she'd retained her own lawyer, a slick guy named Mark who specialized in divorces where money and property were contested. I could tell Emily was trying to manipulate the situation, maybe even threaten me with some fabricated claims of marital assets. She had a right to. I knew she was lying, but it was clear she was trying to turn things in her favor, probably hoping to scare me into settling for less. In the meantime, she kept up her act of being the victim. She'd cry, scream, and accuse me of being controlling, jealous, and paranoid. She even went as far as staging little scenes, acting hurt and betrayed, trying to make me look like the bad guy in front of friends and family, but I wasn't falling for it. I'd seen her true colors now. She was a liar and a thief, plain and simple. One night I caught her sneaking out late again. I followed her quietly and saw her meet Jake at some dingy bar downtown. They kissed in the shadows, her hands all over him. That was the last straw. I took pictures, clear, undeniable proof. It was a sickening sight, but I knew I needed everything I could get to protect myself legally and financially. I was already planning to use that evidence in court, to show the judge how she'd been unfaithful and dishonest about her assets. That same night, I sat in my office, staring at the photos, feeling a mix of rage and despair. How could she do this? How could she betray me, steal from us, and then try to claim our house and Tesla? It felt like she was trying to erase everything we'd built, just to run off with her new guy and the money she'd secretly taken. I was furious, but I also felt something else, a deep sense of betrayal that cut even deeper than the anger. The next day, I met with my lawyer again. We went over the evidence, the bank statements, the texts, the photos. I asked him what my chances were to keep everything. He told me I had a solid case, especially since I could demonstrate that I'd paid for the house and the Tesla myself. But he warned me that Emily might try to claim some sort of community property, even if she wasn't technically entitled to it. That's when I realized I'd have to fight hard and I couldn't let her manipulate the system. Meanwhile, Emily kept pushing her narrative, acting like I was the one in the wrong, that I was unfairly denying her her rights. She went so far as to claim she'd been planning to leave me all along, that she deserved half of everything because she was married to me. That was pure BS. I paid for the house, the Tesla, and most of our savings. She didn't contribute much financially, she just spent what I provided. And lied about her whereabouts. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much she was willing to lie, cheat, and steal just to get what she wanted. It wasn't about love anymore, it was about greed. She wanted the house, the Tesla, my money, and even the little respect I had left. I knew I had to stand firm, refuse to be manipulated, and fight for what was mine. I started compiling a timeline of everything, every lie, every stolen dollar, every secret meeting. I wanted to have a clear record of her deception, so I could present it convincingly in court if it came to that. I also started talking to friends and family, trying to get support and advice. I didn't want to go into this alone. I needed allies, witnesses, anyone who could vouch for my character, and the fact that I'd been honest and responsible throughout this mess. The hardest part was confronting the reality that the woman I loved, or thought I loved, had turned into someone I barely recognized. She was manipulative, selfish, and willing to destroy everything we'd built for her own selfish gains. I kept replaying our memories, trying to hold on to some shred of the woman I'd fallen in love with. But it was slipping away, replaced by this stranger who only cared about herself. I was preparing myself for a legal battle. I knew she'd fight tooth and nail to keep the house and Tesla, and I expected her to try to paint me as the bad guy, controlling, jealous, and unfaithful. I wasn't naive anymore. I knew she'd lie, cheat, and manipulate her way to the top if she had to. But I was ready. I'd do whatever it took to protect what was mine, and I'd make damn sure she didn't walk away with everything. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice, about not letting her get away with betraying me and stealing our future. The legal process moved faster than I expected, and honestly, I felt like I was in a constant state of chaos. Emily's lawyer, Mark, was slick, always trying to spin stories in her favor, claiming she deserved half of everything because we were married, even though I paid for the house and Tesla entirely myself. He'd make arguments about marital contributions that weren't there, trying to muddy the waters. But I had my evidence, screenshots, bank statements, photos of her with Jake, and the recordings I'd secretly made of her calls. I knew I had a strong case, but I also knew she was capable of pulling some dirty tricks. One day, Emily decided to escalate things. She filed a countersuit, claiming that she had an ownership stake in the house and the Tesla because, she said, she contributed emotionally and because we'd been married for so long. She also threw in the claim that I was emotionally abusive, which was laughable. I never raised my voice at her, never hit her, and I always tried to keep things respectful until I found out she'd been cheating and stealing from me. But of course, she spun it differently. Her lawyer painted her as the victim, the wronged wife who deserved her fair share. The court hearings were intense. Emily showed up with her fake tears, her fake outrage, and her fake innocence. She played the victim perfectly, crying about how I was controlling and abusive, trying to turn the judge against me. But I had the evidence. I presented every document, every message, every photo, and every piece of proof that she was lying. I told the court about her affair with Jake, about the money she'd stolen, and about how she was trying to manipulate the system. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the skepticism in her eyes. She asked Emily some tough questions, especially about the money and the house. Emily sputtered, trying to deny everything, but her lies kept unraveling. When it was my turn, I laid out everything plainly: how I paid for the house, how I bought the Tesla, and how Emily had lied to cover her tracks. I explained that I had been the one supporting her financially and emotionally, not the other way around. I could see the judge starting to believe me, especially after I presented the evidence of her affair and her financial deception. Meanwhile, Emily was losing her composure. She raised her voice, accused me of harassment, and claimed I was trying to ruin her reputation. But the judge wasn't buying her theatrics. She ordered a forensic audit of our finances and instructed both of us to produce detailed statements of all assets and liabilities. It was a relief. At least now I knew the truth would come out and I could finally fight back properly. Things got even messier when Emily tried to claim the house as her own, saying that because we were married, she had a right to half of it. I argued that I paid for it entirely, that I owned it legally, and that she had no claim unless she could prove some joint ownership. The Tesla was even easier. Again, I paid for it outright, and it was registered solely in my name. But Emily kept insisting that I was abusing the system, trying to twist the facts. She also made a bizarre claim that I had threatened her and kept her prisoner in the house. I was stunned. I never raised my voice, never laid a finger on her, and I sure as hell didn't threaten her. I think she was just trying to paint me as some kind of monster, hopping to sway the judge's opinion. Honestly, I felt disgusted that she'd stoop so low, lying about things I'd never do. The judge finally paused the hearing to review the evidence and promised a decision soon. I could tell she saw through Emily's lies. But I also knew how manipulative Emily could be. I felt exhausted, emotionally drained from the constant barrage of accusations and legal battles. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I was fighting for what was rightfully mine, and I wasn't going to back down. In the meantime, I started to feel a sense of relief. I'd finally gathered enough proof to stand my ground. I was starting to see that Emily's entire story was built on lies, lies she was desperately trying to cling to in order to keep what she wanted. I realized that I'd been naive, trusting her for too long, but now I was finally taking control of the situation. I wasn't just fighting for the house or the Tesla. I was fighting to reclaim my dignity and to stop her from destroying everything I'd worked so hard for. As I prepared for the next court date, I couldn't help but think about how this all started, how a woman I loved turned into someone I barely recognized. But I also knew I'd come too far to back down now. I'd fight to the end to keep what's mine, and I'd make damn sure she paid for her lies and betrayal. The days leading up to the court decision felt like walking on a tightrope. Every moment was tense, and I was constantly second-guessing everything I'd done, every little detail I'd uncovered. Emily, on her end, seemed desperate, more frantic, more manipulative. She started calling friends and family, spinning her own version of the story, claiming I was a controlling, abusive husband who was trying to ruin her reputation. She even went as far as to accuse me of harassment, which was absurd. I had never raised my voice at her, never laid a finger on her, and I definitely never threatened her. Meanwhile, I was focused on preparing for the final hearing. I worked with my lawyer to tighten up my case, making sure every piece of evidence was in order. I also hired a private investigator to verify some of her claims, just to be absolutely sure I had all the facts straight. The investigator found out Emily had been meeting Jake even more often than I suspected, sometimes multiple times a week, and he had photos to prove it. I kept these to myself, knowing that in court they would speak volumes. 1. Thing that really hit me hard was how Emily kept trying to claim that she contributed emotionally, and that I was neglectful. She painted herself as this victim, trying to make me look like the bad guy. But I knew the truth. She'd lied about everything, from the money to the affair. I also learned she'd been secretly transferring money into accounts in her name, hiding assets, and even trying to set up a new life with Jake. That's when I realized she was planning to run away with everything she could get. The court hearing finally arrived. I was nervous but confident. I knew I had the evidence, and I knew the truth was on my side. Emily walked in looking smug, her face carefully blank, trying to hide her anxiety. Her lawyer, Mark, looked confident, but I could see the slight tremor in his hand when he whispered to her. As the proceedings started, I laid out everything: proof of the house being paid for solely by me, the Tesla I bought with my own money, her lies about the money she transferred, her affair with Jake, and her attempts to claim ownership of our assets. Emily's lawyer tried to argue that she deserved half because they'd been married for so long, and that she'd contributed in ways that weren't financial. The judge cut him off, asking for specifics. I presented the bank statements, the proof of my payments, the photos, and the recordings. I explained how she had been cheating behind my back, stealing money, and planning to leave with Jake once she got her hands on everything. Emily started to get visibly agitated. She tried to argue that I was controlling and abusive, but the judge wasn't buying her act. She asked her some pointed questions about her finances, her affair, and the transfers she'd made without my knowledge. When she couldn't answer convincingly, her face paled. The judge looked at me, then at her, and finally she said she'd need time to review everything before making her ruling. The courtroom was silent for what felt like forever. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was firm. She ruled that I was the legal owner of the house and the Tesla, since I paid for them outright and there was no joint ownership established. She also ordered Emily to return the money she'd stolen, and she dismissed Emily's claims of marital contributions as baseless. Emily's face was a mix of rage and disbelief. She tried to protest, but the judge told her to sit down and be quiet. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. I had won the legal battle for now. But I knew Emily wasn't done yet. She was already talking about appealing, about fighting me in every way she could. Still, I had the evidence, the law on my side, and the truth. I knew that this wasn't just about property or money. It was about standing up to someone who had betrayed me so completely. I'd fought hard and I'd won the first round. That victory gave me a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could move on from this nightmare. But I also knew that the emotional scars wouldn't heal overnight. The betrayal, the lies, the deception, they'd leave a mark. I'd lost trust in the woman I thought I knew, and I'd have to learn how to live with that. Still, I was determined to rebuild my life, to find peace after this chaos. I learned a lot about myself, about resilience, about how far someone can go to betray another, and I'd never let anyone manipulate or lie to me like that again. It's been a brutal lesson, but one I won't forget. I just want to move forward, finally free from the suffocating weight of her lies. The aftermath of the court's decision was a mixed bag. On one hand, I felt a deep sense of relief knowing that I'd protected what was rightfully mine: my house, my Tesla, and most importantly, my dignity. But on the other hand, the emotional toll was heavy. Every time I looked at the house or the car, I was reminded of everything I'd lost: trust, stability, the woman I once loved. It was hard to shake the feeling that I'd been blindsided by someone I had given so much to. Still, I knew I was better off without her lies poisoning my life. The legal fight wasn't over entirely. Emily, true to her manipulative nature, kept trying to drag things out. She filed an appeal, claiming the court's decision was unfair and that I'd cheated her out of her rightful share. It was laughable. She was the one who lied about the money, cheated on me, and tried to steal everything I'd earned. But I had my lawyer ready and I knew how to handle her tactics now. I had to stay strong, even when she sent those nasty messages, accusing me of all kinds of things that weren't true. In the end, I decided to focus on rebuilding myself. I started therapy to deal with the emotional scars, and I threw myself into work, anything to keep busy and not dwell on the betrayal. I also cut out all contact with Emily. I didn't need her toxic presence in my life anymore. The house was quiet now and the Tesla sat in the driveway, a reminder that I'd paid for my future with my own hard work. I'd fought for it and I'd won. Looking back, I realize I've learned a lot from this nightmare. First, trust is fragile and it can be shattered in an instant. Second, never ignore the signs of betrayal. Sometimes, the biggest lies are hidden behind smiles and I love yous. And third, no matter how much it hurts, standing up for yourself is the most important thing. You have to fight for what's yours and never let anyone manipulate or steal. Your sense of security. I want to tell anyone reading this, if you're going through something similar, don't give up. Gather your evidence, stay calm, and fight for your rights. Don't let anyone convince you that you're the bad guy when you're the one being betrayed. And most importantly, take care of yourself, emotionally, mentally, and physically. Because at the end of the day, your happiness and peace are what matter most. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I'm finally free. Free from her lies, her manipulations, and her betrayal. It's going to take time, but I believe I can rebuild my life from this chaos. I've learned the hard way that sometimes the greatest strength comes from surviving the storm and coming out the other side. And that's exactly what I intend to do.